So when you first look at a piece of music, how do you conduct it? Like right off the bat?
Like when I'm studying that piece of music?
Like, you're like, I think this is the piece that we're going to do. Let me open it up. Let me conduct through it. How do you conduct? Like, do you just do a simple pattern, or do you...
Well, I mean, this doesn't really answer your question well, but honestly, I mean, the first thing I do is I don't conduct through it. The first thing I would do is I typically try to sit at the piano. I play through it to kind of get an idea for the different parts and to hear the different lines so that I become more attuned to what the music is looking for. And then it's kind of through that process that I start to understand lines that need to come out of the texture and that sort of thing. And so then ultimately, that influences my conducting, like just my overall knowledge of the piece. But I don't take a piece of music and the first thing I do is conduct it. If that makes sense.
No, it does.
So it's something that comes later after I have my own interpretation of the piece. And I would say probably from the very beginning, I don't approach conducting at the beginning just from, okay, I'm going to use a 4 pattern and that sort of thing. Whenever, like any piece of music, I'm looking at what the music is asking for and, like direction, emphasis, phrasing, those sorts of things. And so I immediately like incorporate those things in my gesture as I'm working on conducting. So it's never like I'm just gonna I sit there and conduct a 4 pattern while I do it, because typically the first thing I do is I put it on the piano or I listen to a recording while I'm kind of following along. I mean, I guess sometimes I might, if I'm like listening to something and I'm following along, my right hand just subconsciously is doing that. Does that answer your question?
No, that does. Okay. So then besides like the ictus, obviously, how do you decide what part of your conducting pattern is the most important? Like when you give a crescendo or an accent on it, like, because a lot of it's like layered sometimes. And so how do you decide which part of that layer you need to bring out the most? If that made any sense.
I think so. I mean, like within the music, if you're looking, if there's lots of different parts, particularly like if it's polyphonic and you got people singing different stuff at different times. I mean, one of the things that you'll find though is that even though people are sometimes, if they're singing different things at different times, there's still a sense of like emphasis on important beats, and even if they're not singing the same words, there's like words that are important on the same beats. But I guess, I mean, I would be looking at the structure of what's being sung. I mean, if it's homophonic, if everybody's just singing the same thing at the same time, then it's easy because we just all follow the same line, and I don't have to worry about, giving any particular area emphasis or cueing. But, I mean, so ultimately it's like, is there a part entering that needs my attention? So that's going to be the most important thing, is the cue to a section that's entering. Is if there's a section that has like the melody and we're like driving to the height of a phrase, then I'm going to probably look at that section and try to show the crescendo to them and hope that it kind of translates to the rest of the ensemble. I mean, it really just depends on what's going on in the music. And I'm looking for, or if it's like a sustain, but there's one voice that is carrying or moving or something like that, then my left hand is going to be supportive of the sustain, but I'm going to look at the part that has the moving part, and I'm going to be. That's how I determine who I'm looking at and what I'm cueing.
Okay.
How's that?
No, that's good.
Okay.
That's good. So why do you think that the choir, when you just conducted a simple 4 pattern versus the one that had more oomph in it, why do you think they responded the way they did?
Well, I going to school at Florida State, there's a conductor, his name is Rodney Eichenberger, and he, for in his time, and he's still alive, and he still is like promoting his kind of train of thought. And there's even a video that he produced called "What They See Is What You Get," and his basic premise is that whatever you're showing to the choir is what you're going to get from the choir. And so if you're looking for crescendo, you have to have something that's looking like crescendo. If you're looking for something to be softer, your gesture can't be big because it's sending mixed signals, right? And so ultimately, if I'm basically giving them no information except time, then that's what I'm going to get, is them singing the right notes at the right time, And I mean, in the video, the first video, I tried to like still, even though I wasn't really doing anything and I didn't really do anything with my face, that I still tried to make eye contact and cue the people that were coming in to sing. And so I was trying to be technically accurate in, not just beating 4 and not looking at anybody, still giving some communication of entrances. But I mean, I think even in the loud section, the crescendo to the big fermata, I don't think I didn't. I mean, I guess technically I could have shown crescendo with my gesture, but I think just in general, I didn't show anything but the 4 pattern. And so ultimately, when you put, and ultimately what you're trying to do is you're transmitting your internal image of what you hear the piece, and I'm trying to make that external in a non-verbal way, and so if I'm, if I want the choir to crescendo, number one, I've got to have eye contact with them, because if they're not looking at me, then nothing I do with my hands is going to mean anything. So I look for eye contact, and then the gesture has to support the idea of crescendo, and not just support the idea of crescendo, but it's got to be in a way that presents the crescendo in a way that is healthy. If it's strained, or you've got like tight hands when you're trying to conduct, and like that's crescendo or that's forte, you're going to get a sound from the choir that is reflective of this. But if your gesture is this, you're going to get it. I mean, you could just have them sing ah, and I could conduct it a couple of different ways, and I would get a different sound from them each time, because we as human interpret what we see in similar ways. Like if we see something small, we're generally going to probably respond to that by not singing very loud. If they see a gesture that's bigger, or we show something, or like our face, our eyes show loud, then they're going to respond to that, whether they're conscious of it or not. It's just like a human instinct. One of the examples that Eichenberger likes to use is, that's got writing on both sides. So say that word.
Up.
Say that word.
Down.
Okay. So did you notice what your voice just did? Up, down. Okay. And so immediately this nonverbal, even though you read it and then you spoke these words out loud, you had a natural instinct to respond to these words, right? That we have like this connection to simple things like this: up, down, faster, slower. And so so it's just a natural response. If we can train our choirs to look at us and train them to respond, and then we support their eye contact with something that's going to reflect what you're trying to get from them musically, and it's not something that's promoting tension, or it's promoting the sound that you're looking for, then you're going to have a good combination of the choir responding in a good way, or responding not like the right way, right? Everybody has their own interpretation, but in a good and a healthy way, and your gesture is reflective of that, then you have proper communication between conductor and choir. And it's where either the communication breaks down between conductor, where the conductor will conduct in 4 and show no crescendo, and then cut off and be like, choir, you should have crescendoed, or you need to be louder, and you did nothing to support what you're asking for. So it's a balance between nonverbal and verbal communication, and making sure the nonverbal supports what you're saying verbally to the choir.